My parents abandoned me 10 years ago, but suddenly, they showed up at my job interview whispering, "No company wants trash like you." Minutes later, the CEO personally hired me as vice president with a six-figure salary. I grew up in Hartsdale, a small suburban town in Westchester County, New York. Our house sat on a quiet, tree-lined street where every mailbox matched and every lawn was meticulously mowed. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My father, Alaric, wore his success like armor, polished suits, rigid routines, and a gaze that made you feel like you owed him an explanation for existing. My mother, Mirabelle, was quieter but just as cold. She ran a boutique flower shop downtown that smelled of eucalyptus and lavender but felt sterile and transactional, just like her affection. My name is Jasper. And for most of my early life, I tried to earn their love like it was some elusive prize. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I didn't party, didn't rebel. But I also never quite fit into their vision of what a proper son should be. When I told them I wanted to attend NYU and major in creative writing, you'd have thought I said I was joining a cult. My father didn't yell, he scoffed. My mother didn't argue, she looked away, like I'd embarrassed her by daring to dream. "We don't waste money on pipe dreams," Alaric said that night, standing over my acceptance letter like it was trash on the counter. "If you want to go be poor and write poems, you can do it on your own." And they meant it. 2 weeks later, on a humid June morning, I found my suitcase packed at the front door. No fight. No tears. Just a quiet dismissal. My mother didn't even come downstairs. My father told me I'd learn the hard way. And I did. I couch hopped for a while, sleeping in basements, borrowed bedrooms, and sometimes even in the back room of a friend's bookstore. I worked every job that didn't require a degree: barista, dog walker, night shift cashier. I barely scraped enough together for tuition, even with scholarships. I skipped meals to afford textbooks, typed essays on public library computers when mine broke, and wore the same winter coat for 4 years. But I made it. I graduated. I wrote. I hustled. I pivoted into branding and content strategy when the journalism gigs dried up. I started helping startups tell their story, and suddenly, the skills that got me mocked became the ones paying my rent. By 27, I was living in Brooklyn, paying my bills on time, and working for a boutique agency that was slowly making a name in the tech world. My confidence grew. So did my resume. And then Veriton called. They were a Fortune 500 tech firm headquartered in Lower Manhattan, sleek, powerful, and looking to expand their creative department. I didn't think I stood a chance, but I applied. A week later, I got a call back. Then a second round. Then, finally, an in-person interview with their CEO. I showed up early that day, dressed in my best blazer. The lobby was massive: marble floors, glass elevators, greenery that looked more curated than grown. I checked in, took a seat by the window, and tried to steady my breathing. That's when I heard them. "Still dressing like a college dropout, I see." I turned. My stomach dropped. There they were. Alaric in his crisp navy suit. Mirabelle in a pale gray coat that probably cost more than my laptop. I hadn't seen or heard from them in 10 years. Not a single call. Not a text. Nothing on birthdays, holidays, or the day I graduated. And yet here they were. Before I could speak, my father leaned in, voice low but venomous. "This place doesn't hire trash. Walk out before you embarrass yourself." I blinked. My mouth went dry. Mirabelle's tone was no warmer. "You're just setting yourself up for failure again." Maybe if you had listened. I stood up and walked away. Straight to the front desk. "My name is Jasper Lang," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm here to meet Mr. Weldon for an 11:30 interview." The receptionist smiled and buzzed me through like nothing was wrong. But my heart pounded like I'd just run 10 blocks. I kept my head down, eyes forward, and prayed no one had seen that humiliating scene. The elevator doors opened onto the top floor, where the air smelled like success and silence. I was ushered into a minimalist conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Moments later, Richard Weldon entered. Mid-50s. Polished. Sharp eyes. Not unkind. We shook hands. "I've already seen your work," he said, wasting no time. "I'm impressed. But tell me, how did you get from barista to brand strategist?" I hesitated. Something in me cracked open. "I didn't have a safety net," I told him. "I got kicked out at 18 for wanting to write. I worked my way through school and taught myself how to sell stories, mine and others." He didn't interrupt. Just nodded. "And just downstairs, two people from my past tried to convince me I wasn't worth this opportunity," I added, unable to help myself. "I'm still here." He smiled then. A slow, deliberate smile. "People who survive that," he said, "don't just work here. They build here." He offered me the role. Vice President of Brand Development. 6-figure salary. Full benefits. Company equity. A corner office. I walked out of that building with my head high, and they were gone. The first few weeks at Veriton felt surreal. My name was on the executive roster. I had an assistant, Lord, who had more grace and professionalism than I knew what to do with. I had a sleek MacBook, a glass-walled office, and an espresso machine that cost more than my first car. It should have felt like a dream, and in some ways, it was. But in others, it felt like I was playing a role I hadn't rehearsed for. Every morning, I'd walk through those polished glass doors and half expect security to stop me, say there was a mistake, tell me to go back downstairs where people like me belonged. But they never did. Instead, people listened when I spoke. They asked for my opinion. I led brainstorming sessions. I presented it to the board. Yet, underneath it all, a part of me still lived in that lobby, the part frozen in front of my parents, humiliated and small. I didn't tell anyone at work about what happened that day. Not Lord, not the team, not even Weldon. I tucked it away like I had so many things before. But it festered. One night, about a month into the role, I was sitting in my office late, long after the cleaning crew had come through. It was raining, and the soft drum of water against the windows made everything feel quieter. I scrolled through some of our rebranding proposals, but I wasn't reading. That's when I saw the envelope. No postage. No label. Just slipped under my office door. Inside was a short handwritten note. "We see you made it. Maybe now you'll understand how hard we had to be to make you strong." No signature. But I knew the handwriting. My stomach turned. Somehow, they had gotten in. Or maybe they knew someone who had access. Either way, it meant they hadn't let go. I tossed the letter into my desk drawer and slammed it shut. The next week, I started getting messages. Not from them, at least not directly. But people from my old neighborhood began popping up. Former classmates. Parents of people I hadn't spoken to since high school. Some were just checking in, but others weren't subtle. "Your parents are proud, you know. They just wanted what's best for you. Maybe it's time to forgive. They were only trying to protect you." I didn't respond to any of them. Then the photos started. At first, they were old family pictures. Ones I hadn't seen in years, me at 6, holding a sparkler in the backyard. Me in a Halloween costume my mother had made from scratch. Me at 12, sitting stiffly between them on the sofa. Then came the more recent ones. Photos of me walking to work. Leaving my apartment. Sitting alone at a cafe with my laptop. They were watching. They hadn't come back into my life, they'd never left it. They'd just been silent. Waiting. And now that I'd made something of myself, they wanted to reclaim what they'd abandoned. I finally broke down and told Nadine. Nadine and I had met 2 years prior, long before Veriton, long before any of the success. She was a photographer with a steel spine and an artist's eye. She saw the world in light and contrast. She also saw right through me. When I told her everything, about the interview, the confrontation, the letter, she didn't say anything right away. She just took my hand and held it tightly. "They don't get to rewrite history just because you proved them wrong," she said quietly. "You owe them nothing." I believed her. But it didn't make it easier. The truth is, I still wanted something. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just answers. Why now? Why this way? Did they ever regret it? Did they even think of me in those 10 years? So, against my better judgment, I wrote them back. I didn't send it by mail. I printed the letter and had my assistant hand-deliver it to the return address that appeared, finally, on a second envelope that arrived a week later. This one was stamped, formal. From their law firm, of all places. They'd sent a letter inviting me to discuss future estate planning. It wasn't a reunion. It was a transaction. Still, I wrote, "You walked away when I needed you most. Not because I failed, but because I dreamed. And now that I've succeeded, you appear not to apologize but to claim space in a life you didn't help build. I don't need your money. I don't need your legacy. What I needed was your love, and you made it very clear that it was conditional. I have no interest in reviving the past. Let this be the last letter you ever receive from me." It was a Thursday morning when Lord came into my office with a strange look on her face. She was holding a manila folder, the kind we typically used for internal reports or vendor agreements. But this one wasn't labeled. She placed it on my desk slowly, almost like it might explode. "This came through reception," she said softly. "A courier brought it. No sender listed." My stomach sank. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, dozens of them, between executives at Veriton. Most were mundane, internal logistics, project notes, marketing campaign drafts. But a few were personal. One mentioned me by name. Another was a thread speculating about whether my promotion had been a favor because of family ties. It was absurd. There were no family ties. My family had disowned me. But someone wanted it to look otherwise. I looked up at Lord, and she seemed to read the question in my eyes before I could speak. "I didn't tell anyone," she said. "I didn't even know half of these people had your name in their mouths. But this looks orchestrated." I nodded. "Thanks, Lord. I'll take care of it." She lingered. "Be careful." As soon as she left, I went to Weldon's office. He was on a call but waved me in. I waited in the corner, staring out at the skyline. When he hung up, I handed him the folder without a word. He read through it slowly. His expression didn't change, but I noticed the way his jaw tightened. "Someone's trying to stir up doubt," he said, flipping the last page. "Probably think you'll get paranoid and walk. Any idea who'd benefit from that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Plenty of people don't like how quickly you rose. Jealousy's not rational." I paused. Then, despite myself, I added, "My parents have been reappearing. I think they're behind this." Weldon raised an eyebrow. "The same ones who tried to hamper your interview?" I nodded. "You're not quitting," he said, like it wasn't even a question. "Not over this. Let's handle it legally." But it wasn't that simple. Later that day, I found out a board member had asked for a reassessment of my promotion. Apparently, rumors were spreading that my family was connected to investors. They weren't. But the idea was enough to plant seeds of doubt. What made it worse was that someone had sent a letter to HR with screenshots of an old blog post I wrote in college, a vulnerable essay about being homeless for a semester and nearly dropping out. The letter suggested I'd lied on my resume about job history and employment dates. It was like they had a campaign against me. I tried to keep my head down, but the tension was becoming impossible to ignore. People who used to greet me in the hallways now looked the other way. Invitations to creative review meetings started to drop off. My assistant, bless her, remained loyal, but even she seemed worried. And then, another letter arrived. Not to my office this time. To my apartment. Nadine opened it before I got home. She was sitting at the kitchen table, pale, the letter in her hand. Her coffee had gone cold. When I walked in, she didn't say anything at first, just handed it to me. It was short. You've made your choice. But family blood doesn't disappear. We'll remind you when it matters most. No names. No return address. No threat, technically. But we both knew what it was. I think they're watching us, Nadine said, voice low. I've seen the same car outside 3 mornings in a row. It never parks. It just idles. I sat down across from her and pressed my hands to my temples. It was too much. The success I had worked for was starting to feel like a trap. My past wasn't just catching up, it was trying to drag me back down. I can't go to the police, I said. There's no proof. No direct threats. You can't let them win, she said, fierce. They want to rattle you into making mistakes. I nodded, but inside, I felt exhausted. Later that week, I confronted a board member I trusted, Elena Singh, a veteran executive with a no bullcrap attitude and a long-standing reputation for being fair. I asked her, quietly, if she'd heard the rumors. She didn't pretend she hadn't. Yes, she said. I've also heard the rebuttals. You're not the first person whose past came back to bite. But the question is, how do you plan to respond? I just want it to stop, I said. Then you need to make it clear you're not afraid of them. Whoever them is. I went home that night and dug out everything I had on my parents, letters, emails, old photos, even a voicemail they once left me when they'd learned about my college graduation from someone else. The meeting with the legal team was sobering. Darrton had their own internal legal counsel, sharp, tactical people used to dealing with intellectual property cases, corporate leaks, and investor disputes. But even they seemed a bit caught off guard when I laid everything out on the table. The letters. The photos. The anonymous accusations. The eerie estate planning letter. Even the cars idling outside our apartment. What you're describing, said Julian Cho, a senior corporate attorney for Veriton, isn't quite harassment in the criminal sense. Yet. But you're documenting everything, which is good. That gives us leverage. He advised me to start a security log, tracking incidents, timestamps, and any witnesses. He also recommended a private investigator. Veriton, to their credit, agreed to cover the expense. They were still standing behind me, for now. When I left the office that day, it was pouring. The kind of spring storm that soaks you in seconds and makes the whole city feel like it's exhaling. I walked a few blocks in the rain without my umbrella, letting the water hit me like a reset button. But it wasn't enough. The heaviness stayed. That night, Nadine and I installed a basic security camera outside our apartment. She handled most of it, she always had a talent for tinkering with electronics, and I spent most of the evening scanning emails, looking for anything I might have missed. Then I got a call. Blocked number. I let it ring once, twice. Then answered. I didn't speak at first. After a beat, a voice came through. Soft. Almost uncertain. Jasper. I don't know what they've told you, but I never wanted to let you go. It was Mirabelle. My mouth went dry. I didn't say anything. I thought, she continued, maybe if we let you struggle a bit, you'd come back. Ready to listen. I laughed. A short, bitter thing. You kicked me out, I said flatly. We were trying to make a point. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. You made your point. And now you want back in? No. I mean. Yes, but it's not what you think. I was about to hang up when she added something that stopped me cold. Your father's sick. I froze. He's been sick for a while, she said. Stage 3 lymphoma. The doctors aren't hopeful. Something shifted in me. Not sympathy, at least, not right away. But a strange, suspended feeling. Like someone had knocked the air out of me in a way that didn't hurt, just hollowed. And? I asked. I just thought you should know. Click. That was it. She hung up. I didn't tell Nadine right away. I didn't know how. Part of me wanted to pretend the call hadn't happened. That they were still just ghosts in the walls of my life, loud, disruptive, but not real. But the following week, I got another letter. This one is typed. Official looking. My father had listed me as his next of kin in his advance directive. Despite everything, I was named on medical paperwork as his emergency contact. Not Mirabelle. Not any of their country club friends. Me. And along with the letter was a request, a meeting. At the hospital. Nadine was livid. Not at me, but at the sheer audacity of it. They dragged you through the mud for years, and now they want compassion, she said, pacing our small living room. You owe them nothing. I know, I said quietly. But I went. Because part of me needed to see for myself. Needed to look into the eyes of the man who'd once stood at the door with my suitcase and told me to learn the hard way. He was smaller than I remembered. Thinner. His face sunken, skin pale and loose where it had once been tight with self-righteousness. He didn't look like Alaric. He looked like a version of him that time had washed away. He didn't say much. Just looked at me for a long time. Then said, "You turned out okay." I didn't respond. After a pause, he added, "I guess I was wrong." I didn't take his hand. I didn't cry. I didn't say I forgave him. But something in that room shifted. Not closure. Not healing. But maybe the first real acknowledgement that I'd been the one to break the cycle, not him. When I got home, Nadine was sitting on the couch, her eyes scanning me like she was trying to assess emotional damage. I sat next to her and leaned my head back. He's dying, I said. She didn't ask if I felt sad. She didn't need to. She just reached over and rested her hand on my leg. Then she said the most grounding thing anyone could in that moment. So what now? I didn't have an answer. So what now? That question stuck with me for days. I didn't visit Alaric again. I didn't reply to the next few messages Mirabelle sent, filled with veiled guilt and casual manipulation. Instead, I focused on work. I poured my energy into a major product rebrand at Veriton that would end up being the most successful campaign of the year. But beneath that, something was building inside me. Not rage. Not sorrow. Something colder. Calmer. More strategic. Revenge, yes. But not the dramatic, explosive kind. Mine would be slow. Quiet. The kind they'd never see coming until it was done. I remembered something my father used to say when I was a kid, usually while correcting me harshly or walking away from a mistake I'd made: the world doesn't hand out trophies for feelings. Results matter. That's all anyone cares about. So I decided to let the results speak for me. Through the private investigator Veriton had hired, I discovered something interesting: my parents' finances were unraveling. Mirabelle had overextended her boutique business, taking out private loans to keep it afloat during the pandemic. Alaric's health meant he hadn't worked in over a year, and their investments, once the pride of every dinner conversation, had taken a sharp downturn. They were drowning, but too proud to say it out loud. They'd come to me not just for legacy or guilt. They came because they needed something. And that gave me leverage. So I made a plan. I called Mirabelle and agreed to meet. We sat in a quiet corner of a bistro in Scarsdale. She wore a gray cashmere sweater and oversized sunglasses she didn't take off, like she thought anonymity could still save her. I wore the same thrifted blazer I'd worn to my Veriton interview. I wanted to feel that weight on my shoulders again, the version of me they'd thrown away. You look Professional, she said, like it hurt her to say it. I am, I replied. She fumbled with her napkin. You know, I meant it when I said we were trying to make you stronger. Your father just, Mirabelle, I cut in, don't try to rewrite history. I didn't come here for apologies. She went quiet. Then I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. What's this? She asked, suspicious. An offer, I said. Inside was a legal agreement, drafted, ironclad, and reviewed by both Barreton's lawyers and my own. It gave me full ownership of her failing business, her beloved flower shop. In exchange? I'd pay off the remaining debt and quietly keep the brand afloat. No public foreclosure. No bankruptcy filings. She could keep the illusion. But it would be mine. The look on her face was almost comical. You want to own my shop, she said. Why? I leaned in slightly. Because it's poetic, I said. You once told me I'd never build anything. Now I get to decide whether your legacy survives. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. But she signed. And the next week, it was official. The flower shop reopened under new branding. Same location, but now with a modern aesthetic, new digital marketing, and a community-forward mission. I turned it into a nonprofit incubator for young artists and small creators. We hosted workshops, poetry readings, and product pop-ups. We hired interns from local high schools who wanted to explore design and storytelling. Mirabelle came by once. She stood on the sidewalk across the street and watched through the window. I saw her, but I didn't wave. She never came in. As for Alaric, he passed away a few months later. Quietly. No grand reconciliations. No bedside confessions. He left nothing to me in his will. That stung a little, I won't lie. But only for a moment. Because the very same week, Barreton announced my promotion. Executive Creative Director. 7-figure package. More control. A seat at the table I used to dream about while folding napkins at a campus cafe a decade earlier. I moved Nadine and I into a brownstone in Park Slope. Alara was born the following spring, wide-eyed and curious, with Nadine's smile and my stubbornness. On the night she won't sleep, I hold her close and tell her stories. Not about Alaric and Mirabelle. About building. About resilience. About starting with nothing and choosing kindness, but never weakness. People sometimes ask if I've forgiven my parents. I say this: forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without letting the memory control you. They tried to bury me. But they didn't know I was a seed. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about reclaiming what they tried to take from me, my worth, my narrative, my voice. And in the end, I did that without shouting. Without dragging them through the mud. Without giving them the power of a fight. No, the best revenge came slowly, with each milestone they never witnessed and every room I entered that they never believed I could. But the final stroke? It happened a few weeks after my father's funeral. I got a message from their attorney. Apparently, Mirabelle was attempting to open a new floral boutique, smaller, upscale, and built under a new LLC name she thought would fly under the radar. She'd tried to replicate everything from her old shop, the branding, the inventory system, even the vendor lists. What she didn't know was that, as part of our signed agreement, I now owned the rights to the name, the original aesthetic, and all digital trademarks of her first store. She was infringing on her own past. I didn't sue her. I didn't need to. Instead, I sent a single letter through my lawyer. One sentence. You built something by stepping on me, now I get to decide if it lives. The new shop never opened. She shut it down within the week. Not because she had to, but because she finally understood. I held the pen now. I was the one writing the narrative. Not her. Not Alaric. Me. And I didn't erase them. I simply left them behind. A year later, I gave a keynote at a national creative leadership conference. Room full of executives, creators, and young dreamers who reminded me of the version of myself I used to be, tired, hungry, full of hope. I told them my story. Not to shame anyone, but to show what was possible when you bet on yourself and kept moving, even when the people who were supposed to love you the most tried to hold you down. After the speech, a young guy came up to me, tears in his eyes. "My dad says art is a waste of time," he said. "But I want to do what you do." I smiled. "You don't need your dad's permission," I said. "You just need to start." And in that moment, I realized, the best revenge wasn't my success. It wasn't the titles or the salary or the buildings with my name on plaques. The best revenge was becoming the person I needed when I was alone. And making sure no one like me ever felt like trash again.